Judge Thomas Parker tapped his gavel, bringing silence to the crowded courtroom. He looked down at the young black woman standing alone before him. Her name was Lisa Wilson, and though her clothes were simple, she stood tall with quiet dignity. Ms. Wilson, this is your third violation this year for unauthorized gatherings in Oakwood Park, Judge Parker said, his voice stern. The city rules are very clear. Lisa adjusted her glasses. Your Honor, those were food drives for families who needed help after the factory closed. We filled out all the proper forms. They were somehow lost in the system. Again. The judge sighed. After 15 years on the bench, he had heard every excuse. His patience had worn thin. Ms. Wilson, rules exist for a reason. Public safety cannot be compromised. The fine is $500 due within 30 days. Around the courtroom, a few whispers broke out. Judge Parker silenced them with a hard look. Lisa nodded without argument. I understand, Your Honor. As she turned to leave, she quietly placed her business card on the clerk's desk. The judge didn't notice, already calling for the next case. Outside the courtroom, Lisa walked down the steps of the old courthouse. The autumn wind blew leaves around her feet. Her friend Ben waited at the bottom, worry on his face. How bad was it? He asked. $500. Same as before. Ben kicked at a pebble. That's not fair. The Rotary Club had their picnic last week without any permits and nobody said a word. Lisa patted his arm. Life isn't fair, Ben. But that doesn't mean we stop trying to make it better. As they walked toward the bus stop, they passed Judge Parker's reserved parking space. His shiny black car sat alone, a symbol of power and privilege, in their struggling town. That evening, Judge Parker drove home to his comfortable house in the hills above town. His wife Helen greeted him at the door. Rough day, dear? She asked, noticing the tired lines around his eyes. The usual. People breaking rules, then making excuses. He hung up his coat. I don't understand why they can't just follow the process, like everyone else. Helen handed him a cup of tea. Maybe the process doesn't work the same for everyone. The judge looked at her sharply. What do you mean by that? Helen shrugged. Just something I've noticed while volunteering at the community center. Some people seem to face more barriers than others. The judge dismissed this with a wave of his hand. The law is blind, Helen. Everyone gets the same treatment in my courtroom. Later that night, as rain tapped against the windows, Judge Parker sat in his study reviewing cases for the next day. His phone rang unexpectedly. Thomas Parker speaking. Judge Parker, this is David from your clerk's office. I'm sorry to bother you at home, but there's something you should know about the Wilson case today. The judge frowned. What about it? Well, sir, after you left, I looked into her complaint about lost paperwork. She was telling the truth. I found 3 separate applications correctly filed months ago. They were marked pending review, but never processed. That's unusual, the judge said slowly. There's more, sir. Ms. Wilson, she's not just a community volunteer. According to her card, she's the new director of the Legal Justice Project. They specialize in cases of systematic discrimination. Judge Parker felt something cold settle in his stomach. I see. After hanging up, he sat in silence. Rain continued to fall outside as his mind worked through the implications. Had he been unfair? Was there truth to what his wife had suggested? He opened his laptop and searched for Lisa Wilson Legal Justice Project. Her professional photo appeared on his screen. The same quiet, dignified woman who had stood before him, accepting his judgment without complaint. The judge closed his eyes, remembering her calm voice. They were somehow lost in the system. Again. For the first time in years, Thomas Parker wondered if perhaps he had been too quick to judge, too certain of his own fairness. The thought was uncomfortable, like a pebble in his shoe that couldn't be ignored. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the hillside mansion and the struggling town below, connecting them in a way the judge had never considered before. The end on. Week later, Judge Parker walked into his chambers to find a thick folder waiting on his desk. His clerk David stood nervously by the door. "What's this?" the judge asked, picking up the heavy file. "It arrived this morning, sir, from Lisa Wilson and the Legal Justice Project." Judge Parker flipped open the folder and began to read. His frown deepened with each page. Inside was a formal complaint documenting 3 years of systematic discrimination in the city's permit process. Charts showed that applications from Oakwood, a predominantly black neighborhood, took 3 times longer to process than those from other areas. Many were mysteriously lost or denied for minor issues that were overlooked in applications from wealthier areas. The judge sat heavily in his chair. "Did you know about this, David?" David shifted uncomfortably. "I had suspicions, sir. The patterns were hard to ignore after a while." Judge Parker continued reading, his tea growing cold beside him. Ms. Wilson had included dozens of statements from community members whose efforts to organize food drives, after-school programs, and neighborhood cleanups had been blocked by endless red tape. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Judge Parker speaking. "Good morning, Your Honor. This is Lisa Wilson." The judge straightened in his chair. "Ms. Wilson, I've just been reviewing your documentation." "I thought you might be," she replied calmly. "I wanted to personally invite you to attend a community meeting in Oakwood this weekend. Before this goes further, I believe you should see for yourself what's happening." The judge hesitated. "This is highly unusual, Ms. Wilson. So is having to file the same permit application 4 times and still get denied, Your Honor." After hanging up, Judge Parker stared out his window at the town below. The courthouse stood on a hill, looking down on the neighborhood spread out beneath it. He could see Oakwood from here, its streets lined with smaller homes and fewer trees than his own neighborhood. That evening, Judge Parker told Helen about his conversation with Lisa Wilson. "Are you going to go?" Helen asked, setting down her book. "It would be improper," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Thomas," Helen said gently, "sometimes seeing the truth is more important than following protocol." Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine. Judge Parker sat in his car outside the Oakwood Community Center, debating whether to go in. He had dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, hoping to blend in, though he knew his face was well known from the local paper. Finally, he stepped out of his car and walked to the entrance. Inside, about 40 people sat in chairs arranged in a circle. Lisa Wilson stood at the front, speaking about the latest permit denials for their youth sports program. She paused mid-sentence when she saw him. "Judge Parker, thank you for coming." All heads turned toward him. Some faces showed surprise, others skepticism, a few showed anger. "Please continue," he said, taking an empty seat near the back. For the next hour, Judge Parker listened as residents shared their stories. A gray-haired man named George described trying to start a community garden on an empty lot, only to have his permits denied 3 times while the land remained unused. A young teacher named Mary explained how her tutoring program had to operate in her tiny apartment because they couldn't get approval to use the empty community rooms in the library after hours. When Lisa showed slides comparing approved events, across the city the pattern was undeniable. White organizers in wealthier neighborhoods received quick approvals, while black organizers in Oakwood faced endless delays and denials. "The system is working exactly as designed," Lisa concluded. "The question is, who is it designed to serve?" After the meeting, Judge Parker approached Lisa as people were leaving. "Thank you for inviting me, Ms. Wilson," he said quietly. "I had no idea things were this systematic." Lisa studied him. "Most people in power don't, Your Honor. That's how these systems survive. They remain invisible to those who benefit from them." Judge Parker nodded slowly. "I'd like to understand more. Would you be willing to show me what your food drive actually does? The one I find you for?" For the first time, Lisa smiled. "We're setting up tomorrow at 9 a.m. Hope you don't mind getting your hands dirty." As Judge Parker drove home, the comfortable certainty that had guided his 15 years on the bench felt shaken. He had always believed in following rules and procedures, but what if the rules themselves were the problem? The end Sunday morning arrived with gray skies threatening rain. Judge Parker parked his car near Oakwood Park and walked toward the cluster of folding tables being set up. He spotted Lisa directing volunteers, pointing where boxes should go. She noticed him and waved. "Judge Parker, you actually came." "I said I would," he replied, feeling oddly nervous. He was used to people being nervous around him, not the other way around. Lisa handed him a blue volunteer vest. "We can use help sorting the vegetables. Robert will show you how." Robert turned out to be a teenage boy with bright eyes and a quick smile. "You're really the judge?" he asked, leading Parker to a table covered with donated produce. "Yes, I am. My grandma says, you're the reason we almost couldn't do this food drive." Judge Parker felt his face grow warm. "Well, there are rules about permits." Robert shrugged. "Weird how those rules only seem to stop certain people." For the next 2 hours, Judge Parker sorted potatoes, carrots, and apples. His back began to ache from standing, but he kept working. He watched as families arrived, some shy, others greeting volunteers by name. A system of dignity guided the process. People chose what they needed, no questions asked. During a break, the judge approached, an elderly woman who was carefully selecting bread. "Hello," he said. "I'm Thomas." "Martha," she replied. "You're new here?" "Yes. May I ask how long you've been coming to these food drives?" Martha smiled. "Since my husband died last year, my pension barely covers rent. Without this, I'd have to choose between medicine and food." She patted his arm. "It's good to see new faces helping out. Most people don't want to see what's happening right under their noses." Her words hit Judge Parker like a physical blow. How many Marthas had he simply not seen from his bench? At midday, dark clouds opened, sending rain pouring down. Volunteers rushed to move food under tents. Judge Parker found himself holding a tarp over a family with small children as they filled their bags with groceries. "Thank you," the mother said softly. "Of course," he replied, suddenly aware of how little he had ever actually helped anyone. When the rain stopped, Lisa called everyone together. "Thanks to all our volunteers. Despite the weather and despite the ongoing permit issues, we served 87 families today." Applause broke out. Judge Parker found himself clapping too, even as shame washed over him. These were the gatherings he had deemed unauthorized, people feeding their neighbors. After the cleanup, Lisa approached him. "What did you think, Judge?" "I think—" He paused, searching for words. "I think I've made some serious mistakes." Lisa offered him a bottle of water. "Most people never even question their assumptions. You showed up. That's something." They sat on a park bench, watching the last volunteers leave. "The rules make sense in theory," Judge Parker said slowly. "Permits ensure safety, proper food handling, crowd control. But if the system applies those rules unequally, then the rules become weapons," Lisa finished. "Used against some communities, but not others." The judge nodded. "I need to ask you something, Ms. Wilson. Why didn't you tell me in court who you were? That you're a lawyer who specializes in these cases?" Lisa looked at him directly. "Would it have mattered? Or would you have seen me as threatening the system you believe in?" Judge Parker thought about this. "I probably wouldn't have listened," he admitted. "I would have seen you as having an agenda. And now? Now I see that I had an agenda too. I just didn't recognize it." As they walked back to their cars, Judge Parker noticed things he'd overlooked before. The playground equipment in need of repair, the library with reduced hours, the potholed streets that the city hadn't fixed. "What happens next?" he asked. "That depends," Lisa replied. "Our formal complaint will move forward, but there's another option." She stopped walking. "You have power in this city, Judge Parker. You could help change the system from within." That evening, Judge Parker sat in his study, rain tapping against the windows again. Helen brought him tea and sat beside him. "How was it?" she asked. "Humbling," he replied. "I've been so certain of my own fairness that I never questioned whether the system itself was fair." Helen took his hand. "So what will you do now?" Judge Parker looked at the stack of papers on his desk. Lisa's documentation, his own research from the past week, and a blank legal pad where he had started drafting a proposal for the city council. "I'm going to do what judges are supposed to do," he said quietly. "Seek justice, real justice." The end on Monday morning, Judge Parker arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. He carried a cup of coffee and determination as he climbed the marble steps. Today would be different. His first call was to the court administrator, James Brown. "James, I need to see all permit denials for Oakwood neighborhood for the past 2 years. Every single one." "That's quite a request, Your Honor," James replied, sounding surprised. "I also want the approval rates for all neighborhoods, and I want them compared side by side." "May I ask why?" Judge Parker took a deep breath. "Because I believe we may have a serious problem with equal treatment under the law." By noon, his desk was covered with files. The numbers were worse than Lisa had shown him. Oakwood applications were denied at 6 times the rate of those from Hillcrest, where the judge himself lived. The average processing time was 47 days for Oakwood versus 8 days for other areas. A knock on his door interrupted his review. It was David, his clerk. "Your Honor, Mayor Phillips is here to see you. He seems upset." Judge Parker straightened his tie. "Send him in." Mayor Robert Phillips was a large man with a booming voice that filled the room. "Thomas, what's this I hear about you digging into the permit system? City manager called me in a panic this morning." "Please sit down, Robert," the judge said calmly. "I found some troubling patterns that need addressing." The mayor's friendly smile faded. "Now look, Thomas. Every system has its inefficiencies, but that Wilson woman is stirring up trouble where none exists." "None exists?" Judge Parker slid a chart across his desk. "Explain these numbers to me." The mayor barely glanced at it. "Statistics can be manipulated to show anything. I've reviewed the actual files, Robert. This isn't about statistics. It's about real people being denied equal access to public services." Mayor Phillips leaned forward. "You've never cared about this before. Why now? Is it because that Wilson woman is threatening legal action? The city can't afford a lawsuit right now." "This isn't about avoiding a lawsuit," Judge Parker replied firmly. "It's about doing what's right." After the mayor left, Judge Parker called Lisa Wilson. "Could we meet? There's something I'd like to propose." That afternoon, they sat in a small coffee shop halfway between the courthouse and Oakwood. Judge Parker explained what he had found and the mayor's reaction. "He's worried about a lawsuit," Lisa said, stirring her tea. "That's all they ever worry about." "What if we could fix this without a lawsuit?" the judge asked. "What if I present a formal recommendation to the city council for a complete overhaul of the permit system? Independent oversight, transparent tracking, clear timelines." Lisa looked skeptical. "You really think they'd listen?" "They'll listen to me," Judge Parker said with quiet confidence. "I've been part of the power structure in this town for 15 years. I've never asked for anything like this before. And if they don't listen, then your lawsuit will be even stronger with my testimony." Lisa studied him carefully. "Why are you doing this? You could just keep your head down, serve out your term, retire comfortably." Judge Parker looked out the window at people passing by on the street, people whose lives were shaped by decisions made in rooms they couldn't enter. "When I became a judge, I took an oath to uphold equal justice under law. I believed I was doing that." He looked back at Lisa. "But justice isn't just about applying rules equally in my courtroom. It's about making sure the whole system treats people equally." 2 weeks later, Judge Parker stood before the city council. The chamber was packed with people from all neighborhoods. Lisa sat in the front row, alongside Robert, Martha, and dozens of Oakwood residents. Mayor Phillips watched, with a tight expression. "Members of the council," Judge Parker began, "I come before you today not just as a judge, but as a citizen who has witnessed an injustice in our midst." For the next 30 minutes, he presented his findings. Charts showed the stark disparities. Testimonies from residents illustrated the human cost. His proposed solution, an equal access oversight committee with representatives from all neighborhoods, was detailed and practical. When he finished, the room was silent. Then slowly, applause began, growing until it filled the chamber. Thank you. Council vote wouldn't happen for another week, but as Judge Parker looked around the room, he saw something he hadn't expected: hope on faces that had known only frustration before. After the meeting, Lisa approached him. "Well done, Judge." "The fight's not over," he cautioned. "It never is," she agreed. "But having someone like you willing to speak the truth, that changes everything." As they walked out together, Judge Parker realized something important. In trying to change the system, he himself had been changed even more. The end 3 months later, Judge Parker stood in Oakwood Park watching children play on new playground equipment. The spring sun warmed his face as he surveyed the busy scene around him. Food stalls lined the walking paths, local artists displayed their work, and music filled the air from a small stage where teenage performers waited their turn. Today marked the first Oakwood Spring Festival, properly permitted and approved in record time. "Quite a change from when I find you for gathering here," he said as Lisa Wilson approached with 2 cups of lemonade. She handed him one. "The Equal Access Committee is working better than I expected. 28 permits approved for Oakwood activities in just 2 months. "Any problems?" the judge asked. "A few stubborn officials still dragging their feet, but the public tracking system makes it harder to hide discrimination. People can see exactly where their application stands and why." Judge Parker nodded, remembering the tense council meeting where his proposal had passed by a single vote. Mayor Phillips had fought it until the end, warning about unnecessary bureaucracy and special treatment. But the evidence had been too strong to ignore. "Your Honor," called a familiar voice. Robert jogged over, wearing a volunteer shirt. "Did you see our new basketball courts? The city finally fixed them last week." "I did." "Looks like they're getting good use today." Robert grinned. "Are you going to play in the community tournament? We need one more for the judges' team." Lisa laughed at Judge Parker's surprised expression. "Several other judges have joined our cause. Did you think you were the only one with a conscience? Before he could answer, Martha approached slowly with her walker. "Judge Parker, I brought you something." She handed him a small container. "Apple pie. Made it myself with apples from our new community garden." "Thank you, Martha. I'm honored." He was touched by her kindness, especially knowing how difficult baking must be for her with her arthritis. "Judge," called David, his clerk, waving from near the information booth. "The mayor's here." Judge Parker excused himself and walked toward the park entrance where Mayor Phillips stood looking uncomfortable. The 2 men hadn't spoken much since the council vote. "Robert," the judge greeted him. "Glad you could make it." "Didn't have much choice," the mayor grumbled. "Election year, after all." Judge Parker smiled. "Of course. Would you like a tour?" As they walked through the festival, Judge Parker pointed out the improvements to the park, the community programs represented at various booths, and the economic activity generated by local vendors. "Look, Thomas," the mayor said finally, stopping, near the playground. "I still think you overstepped, but—" He hesitated, watching children laugh as they slid down a new slide. "I can't argue with the results. Business owners tell me foot traffic is up, crime reports are down, even property values are starting to rise." "It turns out," Judge Parker replied, "that when people feel valued by their city, they invest more in it themselves." The mayor nodded reluctantly. "The Equal Access Committee, it's actually cleared our backlog of applications across the city. Turns out the old system was inefficient for everyone." He extended his hand. "I was wrong. You were right." After the mayor left, Judge Parker found Lisa again. She was helping elderly residents find seats for the upcoming music performance. "Everything okay with the mayor?" she asked. "Better than expected. I think he's finally seeing the benefits." Lisa smiled. People can change when they see the truth with their own eyes. As afternoon turned to evening, Judge Parker sat on a bench watching the community he had once judged so harshly from his courtroom. Martha sat beside him, resting her tired feet. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "my late husband used to say that justice is like gardening. You don't just pull weeds once and expect your garden to stay clean forever." The judge nodded. Wise man, your husband? The work is never done, Martha continued, but it's worth doing all the same. As darkness fell, lanterns lit up throughout the park. On stage, a group of Oakwood teenagers performed a song they had written about their neighborhood, its struggles, its strengths, and its hope for the future. Judge Parker felt something he hadn't experienced in years on the bench. The simple satisfaction of seeing justice not just pronounced but actually lived. Later, as he prepared to leave, Lisa walked him to his car. "You changed things, Judge Parker," she said. He shook his head. "We changed things. I just finally opened my eyes to what was already there." "What matters is that you chose to look," Lisa replied. "Most people in power never do." As Judge Parker drove home, he reflected on how differently he now saw the town below his hillside home. Not as separate neighborhoods requiring different rules, but as one community deserving equal justice. Real justice. The end.